Hey guys, welcome back, it's Meg. Today we are going to be going over the first part of our Monk Hero talent tree that is going to be coming in the War Within. This is the Conduit of the Celestials hero talent tree, and I do just want to preface that all of these talents are in early stages. They're all subject to change as we go through alpha, beta, and then into the earlier parts of the live expansion. And then also that this is just the first part, and the second tree is going to be coming soon, question mark? Not sure when we're going to get it, but we do have another one coming at some point. Starting out with the base talent, we have Celestial Conduit. This is actually an active ability, so we will be adding another button to our bars, and it is a 1.5 minute cooldown. The tooltip reads that the August Celestials empower you, causing you to radiate nature damage onto enemies and healing onto up to 5 injured allies within 20 yards over 4 seconds, split evenly among them. Healing and damage is increased by 6% per enemy struck up to 30%, and you may move while channeling, but casting other healing or damaging spells will cancel the effect. I do find it interesting that this is capped to 20 yards, especially after they've made a lot of statements about Evoker, and I've heard a lot of people in the community complaining about Evoker's range being very limiting. And for a spec like Mistweaver that has normal 40-yard range with Ancient Teachings that has also recently been buffed to match that range, I find it odd that we're getting something that is 20 yards. Hoping that it's just a bit of an oversight, or maybe it's going to be tuned to the point that if it were 40 yards it would be too strong. We'll have to wait and see with that one, but I'm hoping to see that addressed sooner than later. I think that this is very good for Mythic Plus. We don't know the numbers yet, we'll have to wait for the tuning, but the healing and damage increased by 6% per enemy struck up to 30%. I think that's super interesting. I think that that is giving us a lot more power in AoE, so that maybe spinning Crane Kick isn't the only thing that we push in situations like that when we have multiple targets. So 5 targets is kind of the golden point there because we're going up to 30%, but I'm excited to see how that works out, and I'm excited to see the numbers on that one. I'm a big fan of abilities that do damage and healing. Kind of makes sense considering I play a healer that does exactly that all of the time. So I think that this is really kind of feeding into that idea that Mistweaver is a healer that needs to do damage to do healing, and you may as well get a reward out of both things for that. So I think that this is going to be cool, but again, waiting on the numbers before we get too excited about it. For our first row, we have our far left choice node. This is the first choice node in the tree. We have the option between Temple Training or Xuen's Guidance. For Mistweaver, Temple Training is just a super basic Enveloping Mist and Vivify, 10% healing increase. Not a whole lot of talk about there. For Xuen's Guidance, we have Teachings of the Monastery, has a 15% chance to refund a charge when consumed. I don't know if they mean 1 stack or a full stack of 4, so that is some wording that I'm a little confused by what they mean there, so that could probably mean 1 stack or the full 4 or whatever you consumed, not sure. And then just the damage of Tiger Palm is increased by 30%. I could see us swapping between these regularly. If you are doing like a homework key or a key that isn't very demanding from the healing aspect, I think Xuen's Guidance would be the play. Or if you have a situation like Soulbound Goliath with Whitecrest Manor like we do now, you may want to opt for Temple Training for that increased single target healing. This could also be the choice between Prog Raid or Farm Raid. If you find yourself needing more healing or you are progressing a boss, definitely opt for Temple Training for that increased healing. Or if you are in late farm and you're just trying to get through the bosses, or if you're doing heroic or sail or something like that, then Xuen's Guidance for the extra damage would be an option as well, since there is that single target damage from Tiger Palm. These aren't meant to change our gameplay in any terribly meaningful way. These are just small little bits of power here and there throughout the tree, so these are nice passives that you can pick between for multiple different situations. Next up we have Courage of the White Tiger, and this is the central passive node. For Mistweaver, Tiger Palm and Vivify have a 15% chance to cause Xuen to claw your target for physical damage, healing a nearby ally for 200% of the damage done. This number has been changed already. You can see the blue post down below saying that there is an error, and that they actually intended it to be healing a nearby ally for 15% of the damage done. So 200% and 15% are huge differences. I don't really know what was going on there, but that is super tentative because if, you know, we're getting changes on the first day, it hasn't even been a full day at this point. So to be determined on what that number actually ends up being, but I do think that this is pretty cool. I like that Mistweaver is actually getting Xuen into the kit some because he is the coolest Celestial, and that is not an opinion, that's a fact. But in all seriousness, I do think that this is a pretty cool ability, and I am excited to see what that number ends up being, whether it's 200 or 15 or somewhere in between. I like that it is another thing that kind of just happens, and it's not something we need to keep track of, like another buff uptime or hot uptime or something like that. We have too much of that already, so I do like that this does not kind of add on to that long laundry list of things that we need to constantly be aware of. And to our next choice node that is on the far right in the first row, we have Restore Balance and Yu'lon's Knowledge. This one is actually really interesting because I am a Refreshing Jade Wind hater. I do not like this ability at all. However, I do not like it as an active ability. So with Restore Balance, we gain RJW while Chi-Ji, the Red Crane, or Yu'lon, the Jade Serpent, is active. For Yu'lon's Knowledge, you have that RJW duration increased by 10 seconds. It would be sick to be able to get both of these, but unfortunately this is a choice node, so we can only pick one. The Restore Balance is probably going to be my choice in keys, assuming nothing crazy happens with the talent tree that would maybe allow us to get Mistwrap and RJW. Mistwrap is kind of the default in Mythic Plus, and it's not something that I'm looking to change ever. RJW hits only the melee people, and if you have any range, you immediately lose value on it. So that is probably the default there. But you know, you have your tank to heal, you have yourself to heal, and you maybe have a couple melee, so that is something that you could benefit. Yu'lon's Knowledge, and whether or not we will actually be running RJW instead of Mistwrap, I think does depend on how much this is going to be proccing the talent node below this that we'll talk about in a little bit. But I don't really know where to stand on this one yet. I do think that Restore Balance is going to be the default choice in Mythic Plus, but when it comes to Raid, I think it could go either way, and that does depend on the interaction that RJW has with the Chi-Ji talent right below this, as well as anything like if it procs off of Tick, if it procs off of Cast, if it's hasted or not, anything like that could influence how strong either of these talents are. So we'll have to wait and see. Headed down to the second row, we have Heart of the Jade Serpent, and this one was really confusing for me the first couple of times that I read it. So consuming 8 stacks of Shaylin's Gift causes Yu'lon to decrease the cooldown time of Renewing Mist, Rising Sun Kick, Light Cocoon, and Thunder Focus Tea by 100% for 8 seconds. So I do want to talk about this one a lot because the wording was super confusing for me. Consuming 8 stacks of Shaylin's Gift, or 16 if you're talented into Veil of Pride, that was a note that they had left. There's a lot of people that were like, wait, Shaylin's Gift doesn't go to 16, it only goes to 10. I believe it is a collective amount, so you can kind of collect them as you go. You don't have to do 8 stacks all at once, and obviously you can't do 16 stacks all at once. So that would be whenever you consume collectively 8 stacks, then you would get that CDR. The first time I read this, I also thought that this required you to use Yu'lon to access the decreased cooldown time. That is not the case. This is just a cute way of them saying that this is a proc. That's the little flavor aspect that they're adding to it. And then they also said decrease the cooldown time of by 100%. I think what they meant was that it's kind of like a increased cooldown rate to 100%, kind of like we had with back in the encrypted affix in Shadowlands, if that's something you're familiar with, where your abilities would cool down faster, not that their cooldown time would be removed fully. So this one had really weird wording, and I'm hoping that they clarify a little bit if any of that I interpreted was wrong. But I do think that this is interesting, because I could see it kind of becoming degenerate in keys, and I could definitely see a situation where you can't consume Shaylin's Gift stacks fast enough to get your Life Cocoon or Thunder Focus Tea for Expel Harm back, and then you die to a mechanic or something. I could see that happening. There is, I guess, a way to kind of play around it, but it kind of adds on to that, I guess, cognitive load that we already have of keeping track of like 70 different buffs and uptimes and things already, so this one's a bit interesting. I hope that it doesn't end up being as convoluted as I I think it will. But I do think I might be overthinking this one a little bit. So I do like having access to CDR. I think that that's really good for keys. I think it helps us be really dynamic and be able to adjust to different situations quickly, even if it doesn't go as planned. So high hopes for that one. Strength of the Black Ox is the second row center node. This is another passive that after Xuen assists you from the previous talent, your next enveloping miscast time is reduced by 50% and causes Niuzao to grant an absorb shield to 5 nearby allies for 5% of your maximum health. So this sounds kind of like a weak proc on your chi cocoons that you get when you summon your celestial currently, though instead of it being the chi cocoon strength, it's just 5% of your max health. So more shields. This is not going to be hyper impactful, I don't think, since it is RNG based on the proc of Xuen, but I do think that overall it is just going to add up over the course of a key, or in Raid's case, it's going to add up over the course of a raid encounter. Flight of the Red Crane, this is the talent that I was talking about earlier when we were discussing the RJW talents. Refreshing Jade Wind and Spinning Crane Kick have a chance to cause Chi to quickly rush to 5 targets, healing each target. This is very reminiscent of the Chi, the Red Crane cooldown that we had in BFA. That was the old version of Chi, also known as Crackbird. That's where the original name came from, since he ran around all crazy, like he was on crack. So that's where that comes from if you're ever curious, and that is making a small return in the form of a passive proc. So depending, like we were talking about earlier, on the proc rate on this talent based off of RJW, that could depend on whether or not we drop Miswrap for RJW or end up taking either of the two in Mythic Plus. I do feel like I'm saying this after every talent, but it all comes down to the numbers, but that is the most honest answer that I can give about anything power related or any talents that we will be swapping around for it. It really just depends on every version of number that we can have between the actual damage and healing that they do, the proc rate, the interaction with stats like haste cut-offs like we've seen in the past. So again, I know that I am beating a dead horse here, but it all depends on the tuning. For our third row first choice node, we have Niuzao's Protection, which is Fortifying Brew grants you an absorb shield for 25% of your maximum health, and we have Jade Sanctuary. You heal for 10% of your max health instantly when you activate Celestial Conduit and receive 15% less damage for the duration. I know that this conversation came up a lot when the rogues got their hero talent tree about whether or not Blizzard wanted us to tie our defensives into our damage cooldowns, or in this case, our healing and damage cooldown. There's some situations where you'll use this for throughput, and there's some situations where you may just need that 15% DR, and you don't need the healing anywhere else. Kind of feels gross, but if it helps you survive, it helps you survive. For Niuzao's Protection, it honestly just makes Fort Brew a better defensive, and damn, it should be. It's a 4-minute cooldown, or 6 minutes if you only spend one talent point on it. It's about time. So, I mean, there's not a lot to say about that. I think that a 25% shield on a long cooldown like that is totally fine. But if you do find yourself wanting that extra 10% heal on a shorter cooldown at 1.5 for Celestial Conduit, but it is 15% less damage instead of a shield plus the Fort Brew effects, that's going to be up to you. That is probably going to be a key by key basis. And then I believe Jade Sanctuary will probably be the choice for Raid, just because you are going to be having a little bit more consistent throughput in a Raid setting than you are in Keats. That being said, I don't think either of these is a bad choice. I think it just depends on personally what you're struggling with or what you're trying to build around for your content. This one's pretty simple. We have Chi-Chi's Swiftness. This is our third row center node. You get 25% increased movement speed during Celestial Conduit, and for 3 seconds after being assisted by any Celestial. The way that I take this is that any proc that you get from your Xuen or from your Yu'lon, that is going to be giving you that 25% increased movement speed plus the residual, in addition to your actual Celestial summon, your Invoke Chi-Chi, your Invoke Yu'lon, any of those. That's how I take it. That may not be how they intended, But I do think that that is relatively clear because it does say any celestial and your invoke does count. So we are a mobile healer already and it looks like we're only getting faster. Don't know what this means for PvP, but I do think that in keys this is beneficial. Obviously in raid it's beneficial, but I do think in keys you'll probably see this more often. You may see your Mistweaver running off to go gather mobs or something for your tank if they're not as mobile. So that could be kind of cool as a support type of thing that you can do in keys. For our third row final choice node, we have Inner Compass and August Dynasty. For Inner Compass, you switch between alignments after an August Celestial assists you, increasing a corresponding secondary stat by 3%. With Crane, you get Haste, Tiger, you get Critical Strike, Ox, you get Verse, and Serpent Stance, you get Mastery. So this is a little bit reminding me of Stance Dancing back before I was born, back in Mott. It's not something I got to play, and this is a much more simplified version. I think that they use Stance just to kind of pay homage to that old playstyle and be like, hey, we didn't forget. But this is not going to be as impactful as Stance Dancing actually was. I think this is just like a 3% stat stick, which is nice, especially when you're getting into those higher keys and you need that extra verse. I don't know exactly how this is going to work. I don't know if this is something that you'll have any agency over when it comes to picking which stance you want to be in. It kind of reads like the procs are going to be swapping for you and you'll just randomly gain haste if you get a Chi-Ji proc from RJW, or if you get a Xuen proc, you'll just randomly have crit. I don't really know based off of the tooltip how this one's going to work, though I do like the idea of it, since Mistweaver doesn't really have any bad stats. So for Inner Compass, I'm hoping to get a little bit more clarification on how this actually works. If we have control over it, awesome. If not, wouldn't be the first time. So we will see on that one and how that kind of evolves. For August Dynasty, we have casting Jade Fire Stomp increases the damage of your next Rising Sun Kick by 30% or of your next Vivify by 50%. I like this because in keys we're going to be casting Jade Fire Stomp for damage anyway, so if we can amplify our single target damage through our AoE abilities and get a little bit of prio damage out in addition to our AoE, that's awesome. You're also triggering your Ancient Teachings through Jade Fire Stomp, as well as allowing yourself to do AoE healing through Awakened Jade Fire. So overall, I really like that one. I think that if we cannot control the buffs that we get from Inner Compass, August Dynasty will probably be my go-to pick for keys. And then you also have, you know, the added 50% benefit on Vivify. That's nice for those instant Vivify procs for your Vivacious Vivification. That is something that you are going to get every 10 seconds, so it'll be kind of intermittent healing. It's not going to be high prio healing because you're not really looking to Jade Fire Stomp in the middle of high single target damage. Sometimes you do, generally not recommended. But there's a couple different ways that you can play around with that. So I do think that that does fit the profile of Mythic Plus better than Inner Compass does, especially if we can't control it. And finally we have our capstone, which is Unity Within. Celestial Conduit can be recast once during its duration to call upon all of the August Celestials to assist you at 200% effectiveness. Unity Within is automatically cast when Celestial Conduit ends, if not used before expiration. I think that this is actually super cool, and flavor-wise, I'm not big on the lore, I'm not big on class identity, spec identity, but I do actually like having access to all of the Celestials. I think it's really nice just for the unity of the class, because I feel like sometimes Brewmaster and Windwalker feel like friends, and Mistweaver is like the lonely kid left in the corner, because we don't kind of work in as well together as the other two do. So it's kind of nice to have some of that unifying identity here. That being said, with Unity Within, I think that this has the potential to be a very powerful ability, although I'm saying it again, it depends all on the numbers, it depends on the tuning, but it's kind of hard to ignore that 200% effectiveness. That has a ton of potential to be a really powerful cooldown. To me, this feels like the catalyst of Mistweaver. I feel like this is going to be kind of indicative of our playstyle, so it'll depend on what we do, which we will talk about a little bit at the end. I want to see kind of where we're headed in the future, but this feels like the epitome of monk to me. We'll have to see how it's tuned, but I do think that this is going to be facilitating a lot of our burst healing and a lot of our heavy hitting cooldowns in raid, as well as in keys. I just don't know if it will be as impactful, because I feel like with Chi being already so strong, I can't really think of many situations where we're using it to its full potential. So we may end up using this for damage in keys, or we could use it for healing. In keys it can go either way, but in raid I do think that this is kind of going to be the end all be all, you're blasting off to space type of thing. That being said, I don't know if it actually procs the Celestials themselves. I don't know if you're physically getting a Xuen, a Chi-Ji, and all of those, or if you're just getting the buffs that they bring. I'm having a hard time kind of visualizing what is actually going to happen with this, but I do think that this is meant to be a very large cooldown and have a lot of potential for whichever form of content you're doing, whether it's damage in keys or healing in keys or healing in raid. Just to kind of wrap things up here, I am hoping that we get a lot of clarification on some wording, mostly with Unity Within and Heart of the Jade Serpent. I think those were the two that kind of confused me the most. So hoping that we get a little bit more in depth there. And then again, you know, waiting to see numbers, waiting to see tunings, how everything interacts with our stats or current abilities. And then I want to talk briefly about the future of Mistweaver and what I think that this means as we head into the War Within in terms of playstyle. I don't think the Mythic Plus is going to change a whole lot. Our playstyle has been pretty consistent for the entirety that I've been playing it. You punch, you kick, you do healing, bada bing, bada boom, you're done. But when it comes to raid, there's been a lot of discourse over the Tear of Morning and Rising Mist builds. In light of the square root scaling change that we saw, I don't remember what patch, I want to say like 10.1, 10.2, one of those, with basically the more renewing mist out, the weaker your Vivify ended up being, so Rising Mist kind of dropped off there. And then we have our current tier set, which is the Chi Harmony tier set, which encourages the super degenerate single target overhealing splash onto others playstyle that I don't know anyone that likes it actually. Really not liking the turret healer thing. I feel like it's very archaic, but headed into the future, I am hoping that Rising Mist makes it return. I think that it has some really good synergy with a lot of the hero talents that we've seen so far, and this is only part 1. I know it's early, and we still haven't seen our Master of Harmony, which scares me a little bit, because our tier set really promotes degenerate gameplay, and it's called Chi Harmony, and then our talent tree is called Master of Harmony, and I'm a little worried about that being so similarly named. And we also have the lovely note here from our blue post that says, we would like to note that we are planning to make updates to Mistweaver Monk in the War Within to remove Essence Font from the talent tree, along with changes throughout the talent tree to accommodate this and assure that gameplay is not disrupted. Does this mean that Essence Font is being deleted from the game? We don't know. Is it being deleted from the tree? Yes. And then they are also making changes so that we are not disrupted, which really makes it sound like that's being deleted, because if you take something off the tree and it's still in the spellbook, you still have access to it, that's not disrupting anything. But deleting a spell would be pretty disruptive if it was a used spell, in which case it's not. So we'll see where that goes. I do think that they are finally listening to feedback on things like that. I know Mistweavers have been asking for Essence Font to be deleted forever. I think that that is probably the most shared sentiment among most Mistweavers, especially lately now that it's tuned so poorly that it hasn't been on my bars for... It's been a minute, so maybe we will dance on the grave of Essence Font, or maybe we'll be sad that it still exists. We'll find out. But I do think that Essence Font at least being looked at could mean that our mastery could also get looked at as well. Essence Font's been a little bit of a cockblock with the mastery rework, I believe, and I think that's something that not only Mistweaver could use, but all healers could take a look at mastery. So crossing my fingers for that. There's no basis for it, they haven't said anything, but that is just something that I am kind of hoping for. Sorry, Fox. I am very excited as we head into the War Within. I know that it has been a little bit since I've uploaded, and I apologize for that, but I don't do fluff content. and there hasn't really been a whole lot going on in the World of Warcraft, so I've been uploading some runs, some keys to the alt channel, but generally I'm pretty done with the season, kind of waiting for alpha, beta to start, and you'll see a lot more content from me then. We'll do plenty of that live, and then I also do want to revisit the multi-stream thing with YouTube and with Twitch, especially during the day, which are abnormal stream hours for me, but those are the kind of peak beta hours. So as always, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to comment down below and let me know what you think about this tree. I'm really excited for it overall. I think that it's really beneficial for us, and I'm excited to see the next one and where this one takes us. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.